for 28th of May. And lessors to repossess all 54 Go First aircraft as DGCA deregisters them nearly a year after Go First filed for bankruptcy. COVID vaccine scare takes a grip in India after AstraZeneca admits to adverse impact. Ex-ICMR chief says only 7 in 10 lakh may face dire risk. And J&J's subsidiary proposes to settle cancer lawsuits against its talcum powder, agrees to paying about $6.48 billion over 25 years to settle lawsuits. And oil imports from Russia comes in at 12-month high in the month of April. Russian oil imports saved $7.9 billion rupees for India in financial year 24. We're tracking all those stories here on Newsline. But first up, embattled edtech major BYJU'S problems are unending at the moment. The Chinese electronics manufacturer Oppo-Mobiles has approached the Bengaluru bench of National Company Law Tribunal for an insolvency plea against the company. The NCLT has admitted the case and is scheduled to hear it on 28th of May. BYJU'S has been given 2 weeks to respond to the notice. Now, this adds to BYJU'S existing financial burdens, including legal battles and debt issues. The plea shows mounting dues that BYJU'S owes to various growing list of entities. Other cases against the company are its $1.2 billion term loan B to lenders, the Board of Control for Cricket in India, the BCCI plea. BYJU'S is also fighting oppression and mismanagement plea filed by a group of 4 investors over $200 million it raised via rights issue. So another hurdle there for BYJU'S that it will have to cross. Kartik Malhotra here with me in the studio. Kartik, hi. BYJU'S, the cases against BYJU'S, of course, unending, and this comes as a latest jolt.
I think you're right, what you mentioned. This is yet another mountain that BYJU'S has to tide over, and it has thus far, unsuccessfully so, been fighting all these battles on multiple fronts, and all the way from facing bankruptcy lawsuits in the US in a Delaware court to the term loan B, which there is still no method in the madness on how BYJU'S will ever be able to repay that loan, to more domestic human level problems of not being able to pay salaries. So now in the latest, you also have reports emerging that BYJU'S is now linking the sales targets to a weekly payout mechanism, which means that all those who are responsible for this exam season, the month of May, then whatever sales they will be able to garner in the month of May, the employees who have been able to garner those sales are going to now get a weekly payout instead of a monthly payout or a yearly payout as the case was earlier. Now, Oppo filing for another bankruptcy lawsuit in NCLT against BYJU'S is obviously something which, if nothing else, is going to occupy management time, is going to occupy management bandwidth. And at a time like this, where there are so many battlefronts already open, one more is not going to do any good to BYJU'S.
And given that there are at least 4 pleas admitted in NCLT with respect to insolvency and bankruptcy for BYJU'S, it does look like that could also happen in the near future. If all these pleas are entertained, which they've been admitted to the court, and if they materialize going forward, are we looking at IBC starting for BYJU'S? I
mean, one cannot obviously rule that out, Shweta. It's very important, I think, for the courts to ask for right now, and I'm sure they would be asking for it, that what is your financial runway? What is the cash situation in your books? Because if you don't have the money to pay your salaries, you obviously don't have money to pay your creditors.
Right.
And at a time when investors are also coming in, lock, stock and barrel against the company over its new rights issue, the valuation of $200 million as opposed to $22 billion once upon a time, all of this put together not auguring well for the company. So if it doesn't have the cash, it doesn't have the cash. At some point, the courts will have to decide on either letting the company go bankrupt or find somebody to come and take over, and that could be a hostile one. But that will also find, very few takers at this moment, because we haven't seen the edtech industry grow ever since the pandemic pretty much receded. So, who will want to now enter an edtech space or consolidate within the edtech space and take on a company which has such debts and such bad reputation in the market today?
Absolutely. It's getting difficult for BYJU'S by the day. Oppo, one of its investors, has now taken BYJU'S to court in Bengaluru. Moving on now, in a relief for Go First lessors, the civil aviation regulator has deregulated deregistered all 54 Go First aircraft. The aircraft leasing companies are expected to repossess their aircraft nearly 364 days after Wadia-owned airline filed for bankruptcy. The Delhi High Court on 26th of April directed DGCA, the Directorate General of Civil Aviation, to start the process of deregistering the aircraft which have been leased by the airline within 5 working days. Cash-strapped budget airline Go First stopped flying on 3rd of May last year and is currently undergoing voluntary insolvency resolution process. 364 days after Go First decided to file for bankruptcy, lessors have got the aircraft back.
You're right, and I think in a couple of hours from now it's going to be exactly 365 days, because it was the 2nd of May last year when this news had actually emerged. And yeah, 1 year on, whatever Go First was trying to do in terms of getting new bids and trying to get Pratt & Whitney, the engine maker, that it actually puts the entire blame of not servicing the Go First aircraft engines, and then the added inability of Go First to fly, leading to bankruptcy, voluntary as it may be, is all now culminating today, 1 year hence. And not good news for Go First, because if it doesn't have aircraft, what does it have? Right. And hence any sort of a recovery, any sort of a flight back into the air just becomes that much more difficult and perhaps longer. But better news for lessors, because lessors were beginning to lose faith on the Indian regulators by way of the moratorium put on aircraft. But now that they are able to get it back, I think overall lessors are going to have a better positive outlook towards the Indian aviation space, hopefully.
Yeah, aviation space aside, for Go First, it does look like liquidation is the only way out. Of course, they'll be waiting for Singapore arbitration to finalize, but even if that comes in favor, liquidation is the way out now.
I mean, see, if what Go First wants...
There's very little to no value that Go First is offering.
Absolutely. So, so if Indian courts right now decide to take the bankruptcy route completely and liquidate the airline, then all they have remaining as collateral is a 2,000 crore rupee parcel of land in Thane in Mumbai, right? But 2,000 rupees is going to be not even nearly a third of what Go First owes to its creditors. So I don't think creditors would want that sort of a settlement. I think everybody, including Go First, the creditors, as well as Indian courts for that matter, NCLT and so on, would be much happier to wait it out a little bit longer. It's been 1 year already, but wait it out a little bit longer, see what the Singapore arbitration, international arbitration ruling comes in favor of, whether it comes in favor of Go First or not. Because if it does come in favor of Go First is expecting a payday as high as 8,000 crore rupees. So that is going to, at least if nothing else, offset all its liabilities towards the committee of creditors, which is to the tune of about 6,500 rupees or so, and then crore rupees or so, and then keep about 1,500 crore rupee surplus, which can then be deployed in getting the airline back to fly.
All right, well, that's the hope as far as Go First is concerned. With aircraft out of its kitty, there is very little to no value in Go First at the moment, and liquidation seems to be the next course of action. But before we move into break, it's the biggest interview amid elections. Prime Minister Modi has spoken extensively on all political to economic subjects with a panel of 5 editors of TV9 network. The exclusive interview airs tonight at 8 p.m. on this channel. Stay tuned.
Pradhan Mantri and 5 editors roundtable interview.
एक मैं आज पत्ता खोल देता हूं. मेरे मन में तो सवाल है कि और क्या वायनाड में सौदा हुआ है क्या?
देश के नंबर 1 न्यूज नेटवर्क पर प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी.
मैं जानता हूं कि आपका नेटवर्क बहुत बड़ा है, आपका दर्शक संख्या भी बहुत बड़ी है, ये भी मुझे पता है. आपका डिजिटल प्लेटफॉर्म भी बहुत बड़ा है. मैं जब विदेश जाता हूँ तो मुझे रेफरेंस कहीं चाहिए, तो मैं कभी इमीडिएट कहीं जाना है तो मैं आपके डिजिटल प्लेटफॉर्म पे जाता हूँ.
महाराष्ट्र, कर्नाटक, तेलंगाना, गुजरात और पश्चिम बंगाल समेत पूरे भारतवर्ष से प्रधानमंत्री का संवाद. प्रधानमंत्री एंड 5 एडिटर्स राउंड टेबल इंटरव्यू. देखे आज रात 8 बजे.
You were the chosen one to direct Mr. Bachchan for his first endorsement, for his first appearance on the small screen.
It was a life-changing moment.
Have you been a rebel with a cause?
There was a sense of responsibility, there was a sense of frustration.
Are you worried about cancel culture?
You tell a story with a fierce psychosis, you're gonna spoil it anyway.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers. जानना है तो देखिए, समझना है तो सुनिए, सीखना है तो पूछिए और कमाना है तो खरीदिए। जानकारी, सलाह और निवेश सब एक ही सुपर ऐप पर। पैसे का सवाल है तो जवाब है मनी9। आजादी पैसे की, अभी डाउनलोड करें।
Welcome back. A day after news of AstraZeneca acknowledging that COVID vaccine can lead to a rare side effect, fear and panic seem to be gripping India. To put people at ease, a former scientist of Indian Medical Council, the ICMR, Dr. Raman Gangakhedkar, has said that a very small number of people may actually face the risk of COVID-19 vaccine, which is Covishield. Only 7 to 8 individuals out of 10 lakh who receive the Covishield vaccine face the risk of experiencing a rare side effect known as TTS. Now, recently AstraZeneca, the pharmaceutical giant which developed the vaccine in partnership with the University of Oxford, had admitted in a court document in the UK that its COVID-19 vaccine could cause a rare side effect characterized by blood clots and low levels of platelets. So the side effects are rare, but they are real, and ICMR former chief scientist coming on record, Karthik, to suggest one need not panic because the number of people who are actually at risk are very few, 7 out of 1 lakh.
That's right. So
or 10 lakh
7 out
rather.
of 10 lakhs. So 7 in a million is, I mean, you know,
Very rare.
every life is precious. You know, let's put that on record and have it very clear that every life is precious. But you know, you're dealing with a pandemic and a vaccine which was introduced to offset the ill effects and the threat to life through the pandemic. So in that context, perhaps 7 in a million is not a very high number to be alarmed about. But obviously, you know, for those 7 people and those families of 7 people in every million, it is obviously, you know, a big deal. But coming back, I think, to the central debate, you know, many doctors are emerging right now and saying that perhaps most of these side effects were already known. And there are some reports right now, Shweta, which are also indicating that perhaps low platelet count as well as blood clots were very common with the COVID-19 virus itself and not necessarily linked to the vaccine, which means those few people, perhaps, you know, the number could differ from 7 in a million, but there were many instances which were reported of low platelet counts as well as blood clots emerging in somebody's circulatory system after getting COVID-19 and not necessarily only after being vaccinated using Covishield against the COVID-19 pandemic. So that is one more theory which is emerging at the moment. The other theory emerging is that other heart-related issues, including strokes, etc., were also known to have occurred in people within 21 days of getting the COVID vaccine shot. Now, which shot specifically? Was it Covishield? Is there enough data right now to ascertain whether there were more cases of patients who had been injected with the Covishield vaccine as compared to the others which were available in India back in the day, including Covaxin as well as Russia's Sputnik vaccine? Is still not really, you know, out there.
But we don't have the data.
We don't have that data as yet. Or if that data is there, at least it's not reported on and it's not available publicly. But I think, yeah, broadly what it does mean is that at least AstraZeneca has now realized and has now come out in the open about the possibility of TTS, which are symptoms of blood clots as well as low platelet count, and a correlation and a direct linkage with the AstraZeneca vaccine, which was sold in India under the brand name of Covishield, produced by Serum Institute.
Okay, I want to put our viewers at ease at the moment because a lot of them are scrambling for answers. We do know a lot of people died after taking vaccine. Now, it wasn't really confirmed whether they died of TTS. That could be investigated here on. A lot of young people, family members are also saying that we also want to take Covishield to court because our family suffered due to adverse impact. However, the chances and the likelihood of it is very minuscule.
I mean, you know, when somebody loses a precious life, you know, a loved one, obviously you want to find a common enemy to pin the blame on. Now, I think what is important to understand right now is that, is there any direct authoritative correlation between the cause of death or serious ailment, as the case may be. I think there were far more cases of serious ailments than the number of deaths reported after being injected by a vaccine globally, not just in India. Is there a direct correlation on whether it was the vaccine which caused that ailment leading to potential death, or whether it was COVID-19 itself which led to those consequences? I think in the absence of any direct correlation by an authoritative voice on the subject or an institute on the subject, it'll be difficult to right now either put somebody at ease or get somebody to panic on whether to blame the vaccine or not. But I think, yeah, there is going to be some suo motu.
So you're suggesting we need more data, perhaps we need more clarity from ICMR, from the government, from Covishield makers.
I'm saying not just in India. I'm saying not just in India. The Covishield vaccine was administered in, if I remember correctly, more than 120, 130 countries worldwide. So it was a fairly large distributor. The formula was fairly widely distributed. So I don't think this is an India-specific problem. I don't think it's a UK-specific problem. It is a global problem, and it's a global challenge which which is now being fought at various grounds. But what is the contrary theory to this? My contrary theory is that if 7 in a million people did develop serious ailments, and that is hard data, did the vaccine prevent a few lakh people from contracting COVID and that leading to more serious complications?
Okay.
So these 7 people, you may sound
so you're
very...
suggesting basically it's between saving 100 lives versus saving 1 life. You'd rather save those 100 lives at the cost of
I mean, I don't know if the ratio would be 100 to 1
in
or
this case,
a
it's
lakh
7
to 7.
1 million.
We know that the vaccine may have impacted 7 in a million people adversely, but I think anecdotal data and from what you hear from doctors does suggest that not having a vaccine would have led to COVID-related adverse effects in a number much larger than 7 in a million.
All right. I hope our viewers will be able to provide us with better insights on to what they think Covishield, AstraZeneca should have done in this case. There are adverse effects to COVID vaccine. They have finally come out to admit there is a case of saving millions of lives, which COVID vaccine essentially did, versus cases of 7 out of 10 lakh people being affected by a rare disease. We'll leave it at that. Time for a short break. We'll be back with a lot more on the other side. Keep watching Newsline.
Luxury is now becoming a need rather than something that you aspire to be. So that is adding a lot of fuel. Obviously, government has played a vital role in it.
In a city like Mumbai, a luxury home may be something upwards of rupees 10 crores. In city like Delhi, again, maybe something upwards of 8-9 crores. But in Bangalore, we typically define a luxury home, anything which is upwards of about 3 crores.
It's a combination of increased wealth, availability of more luxurious homes, and simultaneously the overall economy doing better.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Welcome back. You're watching Business Plus. Johnson & Johnson's is settling claims that its talc causes cancer. Now, J&J has proposed to paying about $6.48 billion over 25 years to settle talc lawsuits. This would be a part of the settlement to cover allegations that its baby powder contains talc that causes ovarian cancer. This is a proposed settlement of tens of thousands of lawsuits alleging that its baby powder and other talcum powder products were contaminated with asbestos and caused ovarian cancer. The company discontinued sales of its baby powder in North America in 2020 and worldwide in 2023. The company is now selling a cornstarch based formula, though it continues to insist the safety of its talc products. It's now hoping to settle all the existing lawsuits and claims. Finally, it looks like an admission. A settlement is like an admission.
I mean, it's tough to say that. I don't think Johnson & Johnson has pleaded guilty, and I don't think it will plead guilty.
Okay.
So this settlement is pretty much to put an end to the case, to put an end to the lawsuit, because like it or not, whether you settle or you don't, every time you're going to the court and every time there's a hearing and every time there are lawyers
burning
involved,
a hole in your pocket.
You're burning a bigger hole in your pocket, and that is not something that J&J wants at this time. In any case, when there are doubts on the efficacy and the safety of its products, and there are enough anecdotal stories out there which suggest that that parents want to wean away from J&J products and explore perhaps not using any FMCG products at all. And it's not that they're leaving J&J to move to another company. I think the realization is setting in that any sort of chemicals, any sort of products are not safe, and the repercussions of applying them on a child will emerge perhaps many decades later. So broadly, I don't think J&J is likely to plead guilty. J&J is looking at one way to end this class action, this lawsuit.
54,000 cases at that.
54,000 cases, and these cases, I believe, are only inching up every year, because the beauty or the bane of a lawsuit, depending on where you're looking at it from, in the case of a class action, is that you can keep adding more members and you can keep adding more plaintiffs, and overall the payout for a company like J&J is only going to increase if there are more people added or more suitors added to this class action. So better to settle it now, close the case, move on, rather than keep it lingering on and keep providing evidence and keep hoping for a favorable verdict, which in the US, in the case of lawsuits, is very difficult to arrive at.
All right, so there is a proposal, of course, to settle those claims. If 75% of the claimants agree to that payout settlement, the lawsuit will go away. If not, J&J is looking at continuing with defending its course of action and its talcum powder in courts in days and months to come. Moving on now, crude oil imports from Russia has come in at 12-month high in the month of April. Private refiners Reliance Industries and Narayana Energy imported around 770,000 barrels per day of crude oil from Russia in April of 2024, the highest in a year, while public refiners such as IOCL, BPCL and HPCL imported about 1 million barrels per day last month, which is at a 7-month high. Now, analysts and trade sources are attributing higher numbers to more export volumes being shipped out of Russia and lifting of lower cargoes by Chinese refiners. In fact, Russian oil imports led to savings of $7.9 billion in the first 11 months of financial year 24. The value of India's imports of crude and petroleum products declined by 15.2% in April to February of financial year 24, even as the volume rose slightly higher in this period. However, tapering discounts can widen the net oil import bill to about $101 to $104 billion in 2025. It does look like, although the volumes are not declining, they continue to rise. The cost of import is drastically coming down, resulting in savings to the tune of about $7 billion for
Absolutely.
India.
So, $7 to $8 billion is obviously, it's a big number, but look at it in the context of India's total current account deficit, and India has a target to bring CAD down to about 1% of the GDP. Every $1 billion does help, and I think in the volatile times that we live in, especially with what is happening, in the Middle East right now, and the conflict and the volatility in oil prices, though we haven't seen the shocks of rising crude prices hit any country in the world just as yet, but the volatility continues, and nobody had anticipated that. I think our dependence on Russian oil increased when there were sanctions on Russia by other countries where Russia had to sell cheap oil to takers. And India, rightly so, in its own interest, went ahead and signed the deal to import Russian oil. And this Russian import oil is more than balancing India's current account deficit right now in the advent of overall more inflated oil bill when it comes to India's imports from the Middle East.
All right, and India's decision to stay away from the Western sanctions imposed on Russia seem to have paid off by the way of its savings when it comes to Russian oil. I think we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for watching. But remember, this is the biggest interview amid elections. Prime Minister Modi has spoken extensively on all subjects with a panel of 5 editors at TV9 Network. The exclusive interview airs tonight at 8 p.m. on this channel. Stay tuned.
Pradhan Mantri and 5 editors roundtable interview.
एक मैं आज पत्ता खोल देता हूँ। मेरे मन में तो सवाल है कि और क्या वायनाड में सौदा हुआ है क्या?
देश के नंबर 1 न्यूज नेटवर्क पर प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी।
मैं जानता हूं कि आपका नेटवर्क बहुत बड़ा है, आपका दर्शक संख्या भी बहुत बड़ी है, ये भी मुझे पता है। आपका डिजिटल प्लेटफॉर्म भी बहुत बड़ा है। मैं जब विदेश जाता हूं तो मुझे रेफरेंस कहीं चाहिए, तो मैं कभी इमीडिएट कहीं जाना है तो मैं आपके डिजिटल प्लेटफॉर्म पे जाता हूं।
महाराष्ट्र, कर्नाटक, तेलंगाना, गुजरात और पश्चिम बंगाल समेत पूरे भारतवर्ष से प्रधानमंत्री का संवाद। प्रधानमंत्री एंड 5 एडिटर्स राउंड टेबल इंटरव्यू देखें आज रात 8 बजे।
The football is mother of all games.
It is a team sport.
The leadership attitude is taking the ownership.
It's always a big responsibility to take decisions and the right decisions.
I always question the stereotypical.
And that's why you are in that position.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Currently, the industry is facing a lot of challenges as far as demand is concerned. Basically, the US markets has slowed down because of high inflation.
So obviously, diamonds being a dream product, something which doesn't have a utility value or is seen as a luxury. So that obviously goes off your shopping list. That's the first item that will go off your shopping list, especially in recessionary trends.
That lab-grown diamonds are not mined and they do away with the entire mining. So they save up on all the environmental damage that is associated with mining and of course, the mining cost, which is why they're even more affordable.
People that is impacted by all these recessions are the artisans, are the people who work in this industry, right? But I think lab-grown diamond has allowed them to actually use their skills in the same product.
This and more, streaming on world's first news OTT, News 9 Plus. Download now.
We are trying a lot of experiments, innovations and ideas.
We came out with a new format in audio, which is audio series.